The first morning in the new neighborhood was brighter than expected. Streets painted with symmetry, fences polished the same shade of white, grass trimmed as if perfection was a law, not an aesthetic. A quiet stillness floated in the air, the kind that doesn't feel peaceful, but supervised, like everything here breathed only because permission was granted. A red-white casual shirt rustled with a soft breeze as he stood by the driveway, eyes worn for miles behind him and years ahead of him. Next to him, his daughter traced her small fingers along the hood of the old Mustang parked under pale sunlight. The metal was cold, weathered, chipped, like memories Noah's touched in a long time. The car wasn't just a machine. It was a graveyard of a life that once fell whole. He inhaled slowly, not relief, just adjustment. New house, new beginning, new silence to grow through. Boxes lay open on the concrete, smelling of cardboard, old clothes, half-forgotten walls from a home they left behind. Inside one of those boxes, a framed photograph peeked out, a woman smiling with eyes full of tomorrow, except she belonged to yesterday now. The daughter noticed the picture, but didn't touch it. Children learn loss by watching the way fathers hold their breath. The neighborhood looked perfect, painfully perfect. Every porch swept, every curtain pressed, every house identical, like thoughts printed and approved before being allowed to exist. This wasn't suburbia. This was obedience with landscaping. The man lifted the last moving box, muscle slow, fatigue hanging like old rain. The daughter carried only a teddy bear, brown, worn, stitched at the arm. It was the one thing she kept when they downsized, when hospitals became home, when nights grew heavy with paperwork and prayers. She held it like history. Inside, the house echoed. Empty rooms always do. Walls without pictures, hallways without footsteps, like lungs waiting for breath. He set boxes down on the living room floor. The daughter wandered, touching corners cautiously, as if asking the house for permission. She didn't speak. Grief had taught her silence better than language. Upstairs, windows overlooked a cul-de-sac too quiet to be alive. No ball bouncing, no bikes, no laughter. Perfection often kills noise. Sometimes perfection kills more than noise. Evening came with colors fading into pale amber. As night fell, the first sign arrived. Crisp paper taped neatly to the mailbox. A notice, a rule, a tone like authority, wearing perfume. But he didn't react much. One fine wasn't a threat. One rule wasn't a prison. People don't feel chains until they tighten. The Mustang sat in the garage like a sleeping animal. Dust on its frame, tools scattered from a time when life had plans. He wiped his hand across the hood slowly, not fixing it, remembering it. His daughter sat nearby sketching quietly, drawing wings where cars should have wheels. She believed one day it would fly, because children don't know what can happen. They only know what they want to. He didn't correct her. Hope is too rare to discipline. That night was quiet, too quiet. A neighborhood like this shouldn't be that still unless silence was required. The next morning came with artificial calm. A breeze, sunlight, birds that sounded like they were told where to sing. The man stepped outside to find two neighbors trimming bushes already. Perfectly, synchronized, scissors like metronomes keeping time. They didn't smile. They acknowledged without warmth. Like friendliness was against regulation. And regulation was the real mayor here. Later in the day, he noticed a woman across the street. Sharp posture, bright purple suit that stood out like authority in a painting. Clipboard under her arm. Eyes that scanned property lines with ownership rather than observation. She walked with purpose. Heels striking pavement like punctuation marks. Everything about her said discipline. Everything about him said survival. He watched her from the porch, not challenged, just aware. Her presence wasn't loud, but it filled space like law without words. The daughter peered behind him, curiosity and caution braided together in her small frame. The purple-suited woman paused near his yard, measuring grass, glancing at the Mustang, analyzing porch alignment, the way one examines an object, not a family. She left without speaking, but the silence she left behind felt written in ink. Later that week, the rhythm of rules began. Notices slipped into mail slots like routine breaths. Petty infractions. Grass a centimeter too tall. Trash bin too close to curb. Car and driveway too old, too visible, too imperfect. A home that didn't match the brochure threatened the harmony. And harmony here was mandatory. The father read each letter, without reaction. Resistance doesn't start with anger. It starts with endurance. Nights became heavier. New notices delivered early morning like invoices for existing. The daughter stopped drawing wings on the Mustang. She started drawing walls. Not around them. Around the house, thick, high, colorless. She could sense the tightening even before her father acknowledged it. Children feel what adults explain too late. On the 10th day, something changed. A patrol cart rolled slowly down the street at 2 a.m. Flashlight beams crossed windows, lingering deliberately on driveways and doors. Eyes watching for rule breakers, like kindness was contraband here. The man stood near the window in darkness, arms crossed, red-white shirt dim under moonlight. His jaw tightened, not with fear but recognition. He'd seen control before, in different forms, wearing different uniforms. He knew systems that pretend to keep order, but exist to kill freedom gently over time. The neighborhood wasn't home. It was waiting to become cage. And cages aren't built overnight. They build in silence, piece by quiet piece. Days pass without sound, but pressure is a language even silence can speak. Notices multiplied like weeds. Fines for lawn height, mailbox paint, trash lid angle. Paper replaced air. Rules replaced freedom. Every letter was another hand tightening the invisible grip around the property, around his life. The daughter began sleeping lighter, turning in the night, sensing what most adults train themselves to ignore. When the house grows quieter, it's rarely peace. It's breath being held. The man spent more time in the garage, not repairing, not restoring, just sitting, hands resting on rust, eyes resting on memory. The Mustang became confession booth, sanctuary, battlefield, all at once. He'd close his eyes and see her, his wife, smiling through wind with bare feet on dashboard, hair wild, laughter reckless. The road belonged to them once. Now even grass height required permission. He didn't cry. Men like him rarely do. But silence can bruise too. By the third week, someone slipped a brochure under his door. A welcoming message disguised as warning. Glossy photos of matching houses, happy families, compliance regulations printed in small perfect type. A paradise built on obedience. He placed it on the table. He didn't tear it. He didn't read further. He let it exist. Resistance sometimes starts by refusing to disappear. The daughter watched him, studying his stillness like scripture. She didn't know laws, but she knew gravity. Things fall when weight becomes impossible. And weight was collecting. One afternoon, while he fixed a leaking pipe by the hose, the neighborhood shifted. Curtains moved. Eyes followed. Whispers traveled like electricity through fences. A golf cart turned the corner. White body, chrome bars, engine humming like authority wrapped in leisure. Two men inside wore badges polished bright, but meaningless. Their eyes scanned his yard the way predators study movement before pounce. They stopped, clipped uniform smiles, hands behind backs like posture meant power. They didn't say anything. They didn't need to. Presence is pressure. The daughter stepped behind him, barely touching his shirt, but enough for pulse to register. He placed a steadying hand on her shoulder, not to protect her, but to remind her they existed. Existence is resistance too. The men stared longer than necessary, then drove off slow, leaving quiet behind, but not peace. Peace doesn't watch you leave. Night arrived with wind scraping branches across fences. Nothing natural sounded natural here. Even leaves seemed scared to fall. He sat in the living room, TV off, lights dim, daughter drawing on the floor. This time she didn't draw walls. She drew the woman in the purple suit, tall, sharp, standing over their home. And above her, dark clouds. The father's jaw tightened. Not anger, anticipation. Trouble announces itself quietly. Control escalates politely before it strikes. The following morning, thunder rolled in from the horizon like drums of something ancient. Clouds gathered thick, heavy metallic. Even birds looked restless. The man walked the mailbox, expecting another notice. He was right. A thicker envelope this time. Final warning tone. Pay fines. Correct violations. Submit. But submission was a language he had forgotten. He set the envelope aside without opening. Paper cannot rule a heart that has suffered loss deeper than ink. Later that afternoon, the purple suit walked again. He saw her through the window, not approaching, just watching the Mustang like it was a threat. Not the car, what the car represented. Freedom, nonconformity. History, HOA doesn't hate cars. It hates reminders that life existed before rules. Rain followed her footsteps. Light at first, then harder. A storm moved fast, unapologetic, drowning sidewalks in silver lines. The father stepped outside. No umbrella. He let the rain run through hair, shirt clinging to skin, sky rumbling like something waking. Storms don't ask permission. The daughter appeared behind him at the door, hugging herself, watching rain blur the world. She didn't step out. She wasn't afraid. She was processing. Children don't avoid storms. They learn them. He looked up at the sky, eyes half closed, breathing the first honest air since moving here. Wet, wild, uncontrolled. The neighborhood didn't breathe. It held its breath. Patrol lights flashed weakly against water, tires cutting puddles, headlights slicing the storm like surveillance through freedom. Inside, walls felt smaller. Rooms felt watched. Even silence felt cataloged. He picked up another notice. Paper wrinkled slightly from humidity. He placed it next to the others, forming a stack high enough to cast a shadow. The house wasn't shrinking. Paper was growing. Rules can box a man, and only until he remembers he has hands. That night, rain hit the roof like restless fingers. Sleep didn't come. The daughter curled into his side on the couch, breathing soft, trusting despite weather inside and out. He didn't close his eyes. He listened to thunder, to dripping gutters, to pressure. Storm softened rigid things, or revealed they were brittle all along. Morning came with leftover clouds, but new weight in the air, dense like something about to break open. Neighbors stepped out their doors, but slower now. Eyes met. Not long, but long enough. Fear can isolate, resistance can unite. Not loudly, quietly, like cracks forming under paint. Today, the father didn't avoid the window. He watched the street, watched the patrol contour its route, watched purple suit pass like a sermon. She paused again near his home. Rainwater still clinging to plants, sidewalks glossy, grass obediently short. Yet her presence lingered longer this time, as if searching for defiance. Defiance was brewing, not in fists, in stillness. He returned to the garage where the Mustang waited like unfinished sentence. He opened the hood for the first time since moving. Tools clicked, grease-stained skin. Muscles remembered how it felt to work toward movement, not merely exist inside rules. The daughter sat on a stool nearby, drawing again. This time, the Mustang had wings again, but bigger, brighter. Hope had rhythm again. The father exhaled, and for the first time, the place felt challengeable. Neighborhood perfect, yet unstable. Authority polished, yet trembling. Storms leave something behind. Not just water, weakness and structure. He felt it. HOA felt it too. Tension was a fuse now, waiting for spark. And they were all holding matches. Days folded into each other like identical pages, in a manual no one wanted to read. The neighborhood lived by repetition, by precision, by the comfort of control. But something subtle had begun to pulse beneath the surface. A faint tremor under polished sidewalks, an unspoken awareness among the residents who once kept their eyes lowered. They still followed the rules, but now they noticed a man who didn't break, only endured. Endurance frightened systems built on submission. The Mustang engine sat open like a chest cavity, parts exposed, wires resting like veins waiting for spark. The father worked slowly, not rushing restoration. Restoration wasn't just mechanical. It was spiritual, emotional, historical. That car held a version of him he wasn't sure still existed. Fixing it meant waking pieces of himself he had buried. Some nights. He fell asleep in the garage chair, wrench near his hand, engine like a ghost breathing in memory. The daughter would bring him a blanket sometimes, placing it over his shoulders gently, like comforting a storm caught inside a man. She didn't need to speak. She existed like a soft answer to a hard world. One morning, the sun returned strong enough to burn dew into steam. Neighbors, rigid in routine, stepped out simultaneously to check mail, sweep porch edges, adjust garden lines. The father mirrored none of it. He watered a single plant at an angle not approved by handbook standards, and though it seemed meaningless, it was rebellion. Small, quiet, but rebellion. Every revolution begins with something tiny refusing to align. Around the 6th week, the HOA sent something different, a formal notice demanding a yard compliance evaluation, not a suggestion, a requirement, a date, a time, a checklist of expected corrections. The purple-suited woman's signature at the bottom, sharp strokes, confident ink. Control stopped whispering. It had begun to speak. The father placed a notice on the kitchen table next to the rest. The stack was tall now, thick enough to slam, thick enough to burn, thick enough to prove something dangerous. The daughter watched him, waiting for reaction. He offered none, only continued his coffee slowly, like a man who measured storms rather than avoided them. Later that evening, the HOA golf cart passed slower than usual, headlights nearly grazing his porch, engine hum lingering like suspicion. Those inside stared too openly now. watching, tracking, waiting for compliance or collapse. Control prefers collapse. The father spent the night awakening something else. Resolve. It rose like heat inside bone, like engine oil warming under friction, like a road waiting beyond the driveway. The daughter fell asleep with her notebook open. Her latest drawings showed their house surrounded not by fences nor walls, but by storm clouds breaking open to light. She was dreaming forward. Rebellion wasn't just inherited. It was recognized by blood. The day of the inspection arrived dressed in sunlight, but heavy with expectation. The street looked staged. Lawns perfect. Trash bins hidden. Doors freshly painted. Compliance gleamed like armor. But in the middle of this immaculate battlefield sat the Mustang, an open, half-rebuilt, unapologetic metal reflecting morning light. The purple suit arrived. Perfect. Pressed. Prepared. Behind her, 2 HOA patrol members stood with tablets, ready to mark violations like war generals counting casualties. They approached property lines, measuring tape snapping against air, eyes poised to judge. They waited for flinch, for apology, for surrender. None came. Just steady breathing. Just patient silence. Just a man in a red-white shirt refusing to shrink. Something shifted. A neighbor peeked over blinds longer than regulation-approved curiosity would allow. Another stood on their porch a moment too long. A third paused mid-gardening, hands still, eyes locked on inspection. People were watching now, not him. Authority. And authority hates witnesses. After they left, a new notice appeared. Thicker, colder. A warning no longer disguised as community care. It wasn't about lawn height anymore. It wasn't about bins or porch bulbs or paint shade. It was about obedience. Obedience expected. Obedience demanded. He placed a new letter with the rest, and something inside him clicked like a starter ignition catching spark. Storm clouds returned that night, darker, heavier than the first time. Wind whipped through the street, lifting loose leaves like confetti at a funeral for silence. The sky churned metallic, thunder waiting behind a locked jaw. The father stood outside again, soaked shirt clinging to skin, but this time his stance was firmer. Storms no longer washed over him. They moved through him. Pressure changed people. Lightning cracked the sky open, white vein across black canvas, illuminating every house in commandment brightness. For a moment, the neighborhood looked like a frozen photograph. Perfection held still, controlled, framed. Then thunder shattered it. The sound rolled like revelation. The daughter watched from the doorway again, but not afraid. Eyes wide, breathing slow, like someone watching history happen in real time. She wasn't fragile. She was witness. Neighbors stepped outside one by one, drawn to storm away truth draw's breath. They stood under roofs, under porches, wet but awake. Something ancient in the atmosphere, something human, something that had been missing here. A system built on silence cannot survive shared awareness. The father turned his head slightly, just enough to acknowledge that others now existed in the same air, under the same storm, inside the same waiting. And awareness rippled. Subtle, powerful. The HOA saw too. Their patrol cart arrived in minutes, headlights slicing through rain like knives. They didn't stop at his house. They stopped in the center of the street, blocking view, blocking movement, blocking possibility. Not laws. Control. The purple suit stood under storm unshaken, rain rolling off tailored fabric, clipboard protected beneath arm like shield. She scanned the residents as if they were trespassing on their own doorsteps. For the first time, her eyes held caution, because power feels weakest when people stop hiding. The father stared back, not aggressive, not passive, present. Fully. Silence fell heavy, storm roaring but people still. The daughter stepped 1 foot outside into rain, small sneakers sinking into wet pavement, and the world changed shape. Fear cracked. Something new entered its place. Something called defiance, but gentler. A child's kind of defiance, purer, uncomplicated. The HOA saw it. The father felt it. Neighbors breathed it. And storm became prophecy. Because this was not the end of control. This was the beginning of collapse. Episode 1 ended not with victory, not with defeat, but with awareness. Awareness that perfection demands obedience. Awareness that silence is not peace. Awareness that thunder only matters when someone listens. Awaiting ignition. Awaiting spark. Awaiting everything still to come. The storm passed, but rainwater stayed in the cracks of the pavement like memory refusing to evaporate. The neighborhood woke slowly the next morning, early light shining across rooftops, still dripping from night thunder. Nothing looked different, yet everything felt different. Storms don't always break things. Sometimes they reveal what was cracking already. The man stepped outside, shoes sinking slightly in damp soil, red and white shirt drying in cool breeze. His daughter followed quietly, hair still messy from sleep, hugging a cup of warm milk like a shield. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. The previous night had ended in silence heavy enough to be understood. Across the street, people moved with unusual slowness. Curtains didn't snap shut instantly. Doors stayed open longer. Eyes lingered without shame, watching it become an unspoken language. Not curiosity, recognition. Fear shared is softer. Control shared fractures. He walked toward the mailbox cautiously, not like a defeated man, like a man preparing for the next blow. The slot contained 3 envelopes this time, thicker than before. Moisture warped the paper slightly, but the ink inside was sharp, assertive. Each notice printed like indictment, each fine documented like crime. He held them loosely in hand, and instead of frustration, something far more dangerous settled into him. Acceptance of battle. A controlled community expects compliance. It breaks when met with endurance. Windows shifted open slightly. A neighbor across the street stepped outside, gripping a trash bag but pausing, eyes locked him instead of bins. Another leaned over a porch rail, pretending to check weather, gaze fixed like question hanging in air. No one asked anything. No one offered help, but no one retreated either. Silence had changed sides. He returned inside and placed the letters with a growing stack on the table. Paper tower like monument of resistance. The daughter placed her drawings beside them. Storm clouds, wings on cars, a figure in purple, a house without fences. Her art spoke what adults were scared to say. Change had arrived. It was slow but living. Later that day, a new sound entered the street. Not rain, not wind, not surveillance engines. Construction, hammering, cutting. A neighbor installed a wooden swing in their porch. Bright, natural, childish. Not regulation material. Not HOA approved. A direct violation, public, unapologetic. They hammered nails like heartbeat against control. The purple-suited woman passed their house at noon. Clipboard tight, jaw set like the day itself offended her. She paused near the swing, measuring it with her eyes before writing something down. Yet, for the first time, she looked over her shoulder. Because now eyes were watching her as much as she watched them. Power feels small when observed. The father kept working on the Mustang that afternoon, not rushed, not hiding. Hood open again, tools clinking like rhythm. His daughter sat nearby on concrete, sketching something new, this time not just wings. She drew people, lots of them, surrounding the car, faces open, eyes bright, community. She never experienced freedom here, only sensed a moment approaching like echo of a future she could almost touch. As hours passed, sun climbed high, shadow shortening. Heat spread across lawns in equal measure, no bias, no rules. Nature plays fair without policy. The father worked shirt damp, grease on fingers. Sleeves rolled. Muscle memory carried his hands like someone who rebuilt engines once to chase sky, not escape survival. By late afternoon, HOA patrol approached again. Only one man this time. Slower speed. Less confidence. He stopped but didn't get out. He looked and left. Authority was still present, but presence lacked weight. Evening painted the sky gold. Long rays stretching across trim grass, turning every window into reflection. The father sat on front steps, daughter leaning against him. Silent peace between them like fabric warmed by sun. They didn't win anything, but they hadn't lost either. Survival was no longer quiet. It was visible. The next week unfolded like pages stiffening in a book exposed to rain. Something was changing, not fast, but undeniable. Fewer notices arrived. Not because mercy grew, because hesitation did. The HOA could feel resistance building like water behind a dam. Not enough to break yet, but enough to shake foundation. And just when things felt quietly unstable, the structure pushed back harder. It always does. On a Wednesday morning, 3 HOA officials approached his lawn, coordinated, stiff, practiced. The purple suit led with certainty carved into her steps. They assessed his porch, measured his mailbox, photographed his vehicle from 3 angles. Their silence was louder than any warning letter. The daughter stood at the window watching, eyes narrowed, small fingers gripping curtain edge. She wasn't scared this time. She was evaluating. Children are born analysts. They learned to predict hearts before policies. The officials left a red-stamped notice against the door. Final inspection failure. Property non-compliant. Force corrective measures scheduled. Not a suggestion. A threat. The father held the notice. Exhaled slow. Pulse steady. Anger didn't rise. Clarity did. Systems escalate when they fear collapse. The HOA wasn't winning. It was tightening because it was slipping. He looked around. Neighbors glancing from windows, pretending normalcy but failing. They felt the tension too. Something heavy was building, thickening an atmosphere like humidity before thunder. Later that night, patrol arrived again, but with more lights, more presence, more eyes. They scanned houses like hunters counting prey. No one stepped outside this time. Not out of fear, out of calculation. People weren't hiding. They were waiting. Strategy feels like silence too. The man sat in garage under dim bulb glow, Mustang like heart exposed, half fixed, half broken. Tools lay scattered like thoughts. The daughter slept on couch inside, breathing soft, trusting him to carry weight. He held a wrench like memory and stared at engine like future. This wasn't restoration of car. It was restoration of self. Every bolt tightened was another fraction of life reclaimed. Every spark plug cleaned was another wound stitched. Storms don't always destroy. Sometimes they assemble. Midnight deepened. Air thickened. Crickets silent, as if even nature held breath. He stepped outside for air, shirt damp with sweat and oil, hands stained like truth. The neighborhood was dark except two houses where lights flickered faintly. Signs of sleeplessness shared. A figure stood under a porch across the street, shadowed but present. The father felt eyes, not hostile, aligned. Maybe curiosity, maybe respect, maybe something unnamed. Rebellion rarely begins loud. It begins in glances. The father breathed deep, night cool against skin rough from labor. No fear, no defeat, just readiness. And then came the trigger. At dawn, a paper nailed his door. Not mailed, not delivered. Nailed. Mandatory compliance hearing. Presence required. Consequences immediate. Not invitation. Summons. Purple ink. Sharp borders. No illusion of community now. This was war. Polite war. Performative war. But war nonetheless. The daughter saw the notice too, and instead of panic, she reached for her sketchbook. She drew the Mustang again. But this time, its hood was closed. Engine alive. Wheels ready. She knew something even he hadn't admitted yet. He wasn't going to break. He was going to move. Not away. Through. HOA expected surrender. They prepared punishment. Systems forget one thing. Broken men don't fear breaking. And this man had already lost more than property, more than comfort, more than peace. He had buried love. There is nothing left for a man like that to fear. And that terrifying truth had finally awakened. Not rage, not revolt. Purpose. Morning stretched slowly. Pale gold filtering through windows like someone hesitant to enter. The house stood still, yet aware, like walls could feel the shape of coming days. The father dressed without rush. The red-white shirt felt heavier today, not from fabric, but from meaning. Clothes can become armor when a man stops running. His reflection in the mirror looked different, not tired, not defeated. Resolute, like a storm-wearing human skin. The daughter sat at the kitchen table, sipping milk quietly. She didn't ask where he was going. She knew. Children understand battles long before adults sign the first one. Her pencil traced the last unfinished line of her Mustang sketch, shading headlights like eyes preparing to open. Outside, wind carried a coldness not from weather but from anticipation. The cul-de-sac held its breath. Neighbors lingered behind curtains, behind fences, behind hesitation. Every head half visible, every gaze drawn toward the man walking the mailbox like someone walking into inevitability. The summons letter remained pinned to the door, corners fluttering in the breeze like taunt or invitation. He removed it gently, not tearing, not crumpling, handling it like evidence, because that's what it had become. He walked back inside, placed the letter on table beside the tower fines, a monument of pressure, intimidation, control. Paper meant to break him, now collected like ammunition. He stared at them not with stress, with calculation. Every system leaves fingerprints. And this one was smearing itself in ink. Afternoon arrived with strange brightness. Sky too clear for the tension on ground. A quiet before detonation. Residents mowed lawns with robotic precision. But occasionally eyes drifted toward his house, longer than cautious, shorter than bold. Watching had turned into waiting. At 3 p.m., The golf cart appeared again, but this time with more weight, more posture, more intention. It didn't patrol. It parked, center of the street, a line like a checkpoint. Two men stood beside it, arms crossed, badges reflecting too brightly under sun. The kind of shine worn not to protect, but to intimidate. Power performs. He stepped outside slowly, the daughter peeking from doorway, fingers gripping frame. The officials stared with expectation, anticipating fear, hesitation, apology. But he simply stood. Rain wasn't falling today, yet the air felt wet with something imminent. Authority thrives on reaction. Silence disarms it. Neighbors stood still in their yards now, pretending to trim hedges, fix sprinklers, check mail. But no one was working. Everything paused. The entire street became audience. The father walked the curb, stood calmly, and returned inside without acknowledgement. A small act, a loud message. Obedience was no longer guaranteed. Evening shadows stretched long across pavement. Streetlights blinked on early, as if sensing darkness deeper than night. The daughter ate dinner quietly, occasionally glancing toward the window like someone expecting thunder long before lightning. And then the moment arrived, not with warning, not with reason, with force disguised as procedure. At dusk, for uniformed men approached the house, not officers of law, but men contracted to carry authority like weapon. Their boots hit pavement heavy, synchronized, rehearsed. The purple suit stood behind them. Clipboard pressed to her chest like shield or scripture. Neighbors emerged silently, drawn by motion like gravity. Doors opened. Gates clicked. Feet stepped onto porches. No one interfered, but no one retreated either. Storms need witnesses. The father walked out with steady breath, daughter behind him, small fingers gripping his shirt. Sunset lined them in orange fire, shadows stretching in defiance. He didn't ask why they were there. He knew. Systems escalate when ignored. The men formed a half circle. Stance wide, shoulders stiff. They expected panic, expected compliance, expected surrender. But the father only exhaled, slow, deep, like a man stepping into water he already knew the temperature of. Silence cracked, not through noise, through presence. The daughter's grip tightened, breath trembling, but her feet did not step back. Fear didn't shrink her. It anchored her. One of the men moved forward. Hands out, cold intent. Metal restraints glinting under dying sun. The neighborhood gasped without sound. The father raised his wrists, not weakly, not defeated. Willingly, not surrender. Strategy, compliance used as weapon. Submission chosen, not forced. He understood something the HOA never prepared for. A man who chooses to fall is more dangerous than one who resists. His daughter watched, eyes glassy but unbroken. Grief had sculpted her into steel disguised as innocence. She stepped forward slightly, not as protest, but as presence. Her existence in that moment was more rebellion than any fist could be. The restraints clicked closed softly, not violent, precise, official, final. But nothing felt final. As they escorted him toward the patrol cart, neighbors watched without blinking. A woman covered her mouth. A man clenched jaw. A child held bicycle still. The world held breath like lungs filled with electricity. Authority expected relief. Instead, they created witness. And witness is the beginning of revolution. He sat in the back of the vehicle, hands bound, posture straight, eyes forward. He wasn't dragged. He walked. That difference was everything. The daughter stood frozen on the lawn as engines started. Her eyes didn't cry. They burned. Silent fire. Unforgettable. The cart pulled away slow, like victory paraded control. But victory only exists if audience agrees. This audience didn't applaud. They absorbed. They changed. Every neighbor saw what power looked like when it felt threatened. They saw punishment for non-obedience. They saw consequences not for crimes, but for resistance. And something collective shifted. Not like fire, like fuse. The sun disappeared behind rooftops, leaving red glow across clouds. Like sky itself reflected the shirt he wore. Red for blood, white for memory, together for rebellion. The daughter remained still long after the cart left, hands loose at her sides, hair brushing cheek like comforting whisper. She inhaled deeply, small lungs, heavy breath, and walked back inside without running. No panic, no scream, just certainty. She sat at the table and opened her sketchbook to a blank page. Not for walls, not wings, not storms. She drew people again, but this time more. Houses around them, windows open, hands raised, Unity. Resistance was no longer potential. It had become direction. The night grew thick. Neighbors didn't sleep. Footsteps paced on porches. Lights stayed on later than usual. When the daughter finally laid in bed, she stayed awake staring at ceiling, waiting for footsteps that wouldn't come. But fear didn't swallow her. Pain didn't break her. Something older, stronger, more ancestral rose inside her, like she inherited courage from suffering instead of comfort. Some children are born to witness collapse. A few are born to remember why it happens. The father spent that night in a holding room, sterile walls humming with fluorescent light, plastic chair cold, wrist numb but mind burning alive. He studied stains in tile, patterns in silence, tone of footsteps outside door. Systems reveal themselves when they think no one can see. He closed his eyes and pictured rain hitting pavement the moment neighbors stepped out. The way watching became awakening. Control is strongest before collapse. And collapse begins when one person stands still. He was at stillness. Morning came pale. A new notice delivered to his door, but nobody there to receive. The daughter saw it. She didn't touch it. Instead, she opened the front door fully, something no resident ever did. She stood in the entrance barefoot, hair messy, face tired but calm. Neighbors across the street saw, and something inside them cracked larger. One by one, doors opened. Light spilled on the lawns. People stood watching her, not him, a child leading where adults feared. The father returned hours later, not broken, not bent. Released, not forgiven. He walked down the street slowly, shirt wrinkled, wrists red, eyes unchanged. Not defeated. Defined. Neighbors watched openly now. Some nodded once. Some simply breathed deeper. Acknowledgement had replaced avoidance. He reached his daughter. She ran into his arms, but not like someone rescued, like someone who knew he would always return, regardless of cage. He lifted her, exhaled into her hair, something unspoken passing between them. Not comfort, conviction. And in that moment, the HOA didn't gain control. They lost it because they made him symbol, not subject. And symbols don't obey. They inspire. The Mustang waited in garage, engine still incomplete but no longer silent. Tools lay beside it like soldiers awaiting call. He set his daughter down gently. He stepped into garage like a man stepping into battlefield he chose. He picked up wrench. Grease-stained skin again. And for the first time, the engine turned. Not fully, not cleanly, but it sparked. And sparks make fire. Fire makes movement. Movement makes change. By nightfall, something irreversible lived in the neighborhood. Not rebellion yet, but rhythm. A single family had awakened a street. A street would awaken a community. A community would decide fate of its rulers. Episode 2 ends not with victory, but ignition. The engine had spoken, and everything would answer. Morning returned differently now. Not soft, not slow, not like forgiveness, but like footsteps approaching. Quiet, steady, undeniable. The neighborhood that once felt frozen now carried a pulse beneath pavement, beating under lawns, vibrating through shutters. Something had shifted after the arrest attempt. Something alive, something awake. When the father stepped outside in his red-white shirt, sunlight did not feel like surveillance anymore. It felt like spotlight. The cul-de-sac watched not with suspicion, but with curiosity sharpened into expectation. People didn't hide behind curtains. They didn't pretend to check mail. They stood in driveways quietly, like witnesses who knew trial was no longer theoretical. It had begun. He walked to the Mustang with slow calm, rested his palm on metal still cold from night. The engine that flickered to life yesterday had changed him, not because it worked, but because it responded. Machines don't lie. They either move or they don't. And this one moved. Even the daughter felt the shift. She sat cross-legged on pavement beside him, sketchbook resting on knees, pencil tapping like heartbeat. Her drawings had changed. Bolder strokes, less fear, more sky. The stack of notices on the kitchen table now reached past her shoulder. But paper felt smaller than last week. Fines that once suffocated now looked flimsy, like threats losing weight. Power collapses long before it admits defeat. By midday, the purple suit woman appeared again, but something about her had changed. She walked faster, with clipped urgency rather than calculated control. Her heels hit pavement like someone trying to declare dominance, but the sound echoed strangely, hollow, brittle, like authority forced instead of assumed. She ignored neighbors watching. But neighbors did not ignore her. The daughter stood by the porch railing, unafraid, eyes locked directly onto the woman as she passed. No flinch, no shrink, a simple stare unbroken. That stare held something no law could regulate. Awareness. Authority hates being looked at. It prefers being obeyed. The father worked in garage through afternoon heat, sweat across neck, wrench turning bolts like clock rewinding. Engine parts gleamed under sunlight in ways they hadn't for years, like they remembered purpose, like they wanted to run again. He didn't smile, but something behind his ribs did. Progress didn't feel like victory. It felt like momentum. Evening approached with breeze that carried whispers instead of rules. Two neighbors walked past slowly, not close, but not avoiding either. Their eyes scanned the Mustang, then the man, then each other. A recognition passed between them. Quiet, small, powerful. Nothing spoken, yet conversation existed. Communities don't rebel with fists first. They rebel with glances. Rain returned at night. Not storm, just drizzle like memory of thunder. Drops hit the Mustang hood with soft rhythm, as if sky was tapping on metal asking when it would move again. The father worked beneath bulb light until daughter fell asleep in folding chair, pencil still in her hand. He carried her inside, placed blanket over her small body, then stood in hallway watching her breathe. She looked peaceful, but not fragile. Children forged by loss do not break easily. They bend, stretch, harden, like steel shaped in flame. He stepped back outside, rain misting hair, shirt damp again. The street reflected orange and silver like molten gold under lampposts. Houses identical, but feeling fractured, like mirrors cracked along edges. From one porch, a neighbor stood smoking quietly, eyes fixed forward, no fear in stance. Another porch light flicked twice purposely, as if signaling something unspoken. People were choosing sides. Not loud, not declared, but chosen. The next morning came colder, wind sharper, something ahead. A new HOA letter arrived, thicker than all before. Not printed, hand-signed, fresh ink, heavy tone. The word hearing escalation proceedings stamped across top, like verdict before trial. They weren't warning anymore. They were preparing to act. The daughter watched him read it. Her face didn't fall. It steeled. She walked to the garage without waiting. Opened sketchbook, sat near Mustang silently. She wasn't just drawing now. She was recording. History was unfolding in her pencil. Neighbors noticed the summons van idling near community office that afternoon. Tinted windows, engine too quiet. The purple suit woman entered with urgency, building tension instead of resolving it. Something was being arranged inside that building. Something bigger than fines. Bigger than warnings. Bigger than rules. And the neighborhood felt it. The father spent the day tightening engine bolts with focus that felt like violence and meditation combined. Every turn of wrench echoed in side ribs, sinking breath with metal. When he paused to stretch, the daughter held out a part he needed without him asking. She knew rhythm. She understood movement. Resistance was no longer his alone. It was inherited. By evening, clouds churned heavy again, darker than last storm, like bruises blooming across sky. Wind flicked through trees sharply, bending branches like apology forced through stubborn wood. Something massive was building. At twilight, neighbors gathered unintentionally, one stepping out, then another, then a third, drawn by unseen force. They didn't speak to each other. They just existed in open space at the same time, breathing same air, watching same house, same storm, same man. The daughter stood beside her father now, both silhouettes under garage light, Mustang behind them like beasts waking from long winter. The hood trembled gently, engine waiting to be called. The street looked like theater stage before curtain drop. All players present, all breathing loaded, all expectation heavy. Power doesn't collapse alone. It collapses in front of witnesses. The purple suit reappeared under streetlight, clipboard in hand, jaw set, posture rigid. But something flickered behind her eyes, fear, doubt, fatigue, cracks too small for most to notice, but not invisible. She wasn't here to observe. She was here to end something. She didn't walk toward him. She stared, long enough for neighbors to freeze, long enough for silence to thicken into threat. Then she turned away. Not triumph. Retreat. Not victory. Delay. The HOA meeting was coming. Escalated, formal, orchestrated. The father knew. Neighbors knew. The storm knew. Collapse was near. Not because he fought, because he endured. And endurance is rebellion with patience. The daughter looked at the Mustang again, this time with expectation, not hope. She didn't draw wings tonight. She drew wheels rolling. Road bending forward. A car not parked, moving. She could see tomorrow, even if the HOA could not. The day of the hearing arrived like the air before lightning. charged, stretched, unwilling to remain still. Autumn wind cut across driveways, lifting loose leaves like messages carried by ghosts of silence past. The cul-de-sac was unusually awake for morning. Curtains half open, porch steps occupied, garden shears and used in idle hands. People didn't pretend anymore. They watched openly, without apology. The father stood at the counter finishing his coffee slowly, shoulders square beneath the same red-white shirt. It had become more than clothing. It was identity, symbol, quiet flag of defiance. The daughter ate cereal across from him, spoon slow, eyes steady, presence small but towering. Children sense battles adults try to avoid. She did not avoid anything. A van from the HOA rolled into the street shortly after noon. Tinted windows like closed decisions, tires crunching gravel like teeth grinding. The purple suit woman stepped out first, posture composed but eyes hard with determination sharpened into weapon. She moved toward the community hall with stiff purpose. Behind her, board members stepped out one by one, suits uniform like uniforms of control. No neighbors followed, yet every neighbor watched. The father exhaled once, not deep controlled. He wasn't walking into defeat. He was walking into exposure. Systems fall hardest when people watch them operate. He left the house with calm footsteps. The daughter followed the porch but not beyond, hands gripping the rail, her presence anchored in stillness. Their eyes met briefly, not as goodbye, but as exchange. He carried her strength. She inherited his resolve. He walked toward the hall alone, yet not alone. The community hall sat clean, polished, smelling faintly of bureaucracy, walls pale, chairs aligned like obedience. The board sat at the front like judges waiting to read verdict already written. The purple suit stood behind them, clipboard rigid against chest like shield of policies. The father took a single seat in the center row, the only one filled. Intimidation by emptiness, a tactic old as power itself. But emptiness isn't absence, it's potential. The hearing began without ceremony. Papers shuffled like whispers of authority. The father listened without flinch, absorbing words like rainfall absorbed by soil. They listed violations: grass height, mailbox paint, unauthorized vehicle, fence tone, compliance failure, repeated non-adjustment. The list was long, rehearsed, practiced enough to sound like performance rather than justice. He did not argue. He did not interrupt. Silence spoke for him, because silence makes powerful people over-explain. As accusations grew, tones sharpened. The purple suit paced slowly, like lying in elegant clothing, reading policies like scripture carved in law. Her voice carried no kindness, only precision. Yet beneath precision, something trembled. Fear of losing grip, fear of losing structure, fear of losing control over what once bowed easily. Halfway through, doors at the back of the hall opened. One neighbor stepped inside quietly. Then another. Then two more. No words. No chant. No rebellion. Just presence. Their footsteps echoed louder than any argument. The board stiffened. Papers paused midair. Authority had been counting on isolation, not audience. The father remained still, gaze forward, heartbeat steady. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. They came for themselves, not for him. More residents entered, filling rows slowly. Old men with folded arms. Young mothers with strollers. A teenager still in work apron. A retired couple holding hands. Not loud, not dramatic, just present. Presence is louder than protest when power expects silence. The board resumed reading codes, but words sounded thinner now. Each sentence hit air differently, like striking metal softened by heat. Control began to fracture. Eyes darted. Pens clicked nervously. The purple suit continued, but her steps faltered by fraction of breath. The father watched quietly as weight shifted. He hadn't ignited them. Their own lives had. Rules suffocate long before anyone resists. Suffocation simply waits for lungs brave enough to inhale deeper. The board moved to final ruling. Not verdict, really. Decision disguised as law. Property lien risk. Removal demand for Mustang. Mandatory compliance schedule. Potential eviction procedure. The room did not gasp. It stiffened, holding one collective breath like storm air swelling. He listened without reaction, like man watching wildfire through window knowing he holds water in his hands. The daughter sat alone on the porch miles away, but the bond between them didn't thin. She sparked inside him, quiet fire traveling through bone and memory. The hearing concluded abruptly, like blade falling without flourish. Papers stacked final, signatures stamped like hammer strikes. The father stood slowly, calm, anchored, unbroken. He left without haste, without slouch, without defeat. Outside, clouds rolled like bruised sky, purples, grays, deep silver veins swelling across the horizon, the same color as her suit. She stepped out moments later, expression unreadable, posture costly, authority heavy on her frame. She expected fear in his eyes. She found none. Storm spread across sky like curtain drawing. Wind picked up loose leaves again. Only this time they spiraled upward instead of falling. A strange reversal, like gravity reconsidering its loyalties. The father returned home walking through shifting air, neighbors watching with breaths held like candles before wind. The daughter ran down porch steps, not frantic, urgent. He lifted her without kneeling. She pressed her face to his neck. He exhaled into her hair. Everything felt slow, heavy, meaningful. Night rose quickly, too quickly, like sky trying to swallow sun before truth could settle. Clouds stacked thick like stone. Wind shook street signs. Gates clanged. Power lines hummed like strained voices. The storm wasn't coming. It was here. The father stood in garage doorway, Mustang headlights reflecting faint silver as if waiting to open eyes. The daughter sat beside tool bench again, sketchbook on lap, but she wasn't drawing. She was watching him, like witness waiting for movement. He placed hand on hood, gentle, final, ready. The engine responded like heartbeat kicking against rib cage. Thunder struck. Not sky, community. Lights flickered across houses. Power surged. Rain shattered ground like applause for rebellion not yet formed. The Mustang roared, engine awake, alive, hungry. It didn't idle softly. It spoke like beast finally uncaged. Neighbors stepped into rain one by one. No umbrellas, no hesitation. Water-soaked shirts, dresses, hair. Fear washed off skin like dust. People formed circle around driveway, naturally, without plan. A gathering without announcement. A movement without leader. The purple suit watched from across street, rain staining fabric darker. Clipboard lowering to her side, like surrender disguised as confusion. Authority never fears violence first. It fears unity. The father revved engine once. Sound carving through storm like lightning made of steel. The street vibrated beneath tires. The daughter stood at his side now, hand resting on door, water dripping from fingertips like baptism. The storm flashed again, not to blind, but to reveal. For a moment, everything was frozen in white-blue silhouette. The father, unbroken. The daughter, unafraid. The Mustang alive. Neighbors, awake. Power, trembling. Control, cracking. Revolution, breathing. Thunder followed like answer. And episode 3 ends not with defeat. Not with fight. Not with flames. With ignition. Because the moment a community witnesses its own strength, collapse is no longer a question. It becomes a countdown. The storm did not fade with night. It lingered, not like weather, but like consequence. Rain washed over rooftops until gutters overflowed like unspoken words finally escaping. Thunder rolled hour after hour, patient and powerful, as if the sky itself refused to sleep until something changed below it. At dawn, clouds still bruised the horizon, purple and gray like war paint drying across the heavens. The street glistened silver in the first cold light. Driveways dripped like fresh wounds. Trees shook gently, no wind required, as though the earth itself trembled, anticipating the next movement. The father stepped outside early, Mustang idling low like volcano, waiting beneath crust. Exhaust curled around pavement in slow spirals, ghost white, warm, alive. The engine no longer whispered. It growled, controlled, contained, but unmistakably ready. The daughter stood beside him again. No coat, no umbrella. Bare feet warming on concrete as sky lightened. Her hair clung to her forehead from storm humidity, but her expression carried something older than childhood. She wasn't watching him fix the car anymore. She was watching him prepare to drive it. The neighborhood stirred slowly, sleep broken by memory of thunder and revving steel. Curtains lifted, doors cracked open. People stepped outside with coffee cups still half full, like they had woken mid-thought. No one looked away. Last night didn't disappear with sunrise. It stayed, lodged behind ribs where truth becomes permanent. Change rarely arrives loud. Sometimes it arrives breathing. The HOA noticed too. Their van reappeared by mid-morning. Tires cutting water still pulled along curbs. The purple suit emerged again, clipboard replaced by something smaller. A phone, a key, a card. Tools of escalation. She surveyed the street, not like ruler, but like gambler. Control was no longer guaranteed. She could feel it, like cold breath down spine. Authority hates losing slowly. It prefers to crush quickly. The board didn't send warnings today. They sent contractors. Men in reflective vests, gloves thick, boots heavy. Not built for paperwork. Built for removal. Removal of fences. Removal of property. Removal of defiance. The daughter watched them from porch. Knees pulled to chest. Arms wrapped around legs. She did not cry. She observed, quietly, sharply, like cameras storing evidence. The father stood beside the Mustang with arms folded, rain still drying across shirt. His stillness felt louder than machines unloading from truck. Neighbors stepped outside slowly as the workers approached yard lines. One man with lawn shears paused mid-step, eyes locked on their movements. A woman abandoned her recycling bins halfway up driveway. A teenager shut off music mid-song and simply watched. No orders were spoken, yet the street froze into silence. The contractors expected irritation. They received witness instead. The first worker lifted a tool toward the Mustang, uncertainty trembling in his shoulders like metal before strike. The father stepped forward once, not aggressive, not violent, simply present. Presence is a wall when built from resolve. Rain began again, soft at first, then heavier, like skies siding with man instead of authority. The workers hesitated beneath it. Uniforms darkening, tools slickening. The purple suit remained stiff, water streaking across her eyelids like unacknowledged tears. She wasn't crying, but something inside her was breaking, because power works only when people believe in it, and belief was dissolving like ink in stormwater. The contractors backed away, slow retreat, uncertain, unwilling to move against a man who did not move away. They loaded tools back into van, without command. No orders needed reversing. Collapse began as hesitation, not rebellion. The purple suit watched them leave, expression unreadable, throat tight, breath short. The father did not look at her. He returned to Mustang hood, wiping rain from chrome engine with quiet patience. He didn't win. He simply didn't lose. And sometimes, that's enough to shift entire worlds. Afternoon sunlight broke through clouds like forgiveness denied. Steam rose from pavement. Storm gave way to clarity sharper than blade drawn. Neighbors gathered in twos, in threes, not hiding, not whispering, simply existing together. Bodies create change long before voices do. By sunset, something irreversible lived in the air. Tension turned into unity. Fear turned into weight. Control turned into question. The HOA no longer felt like law. It felt like institution struggling to breathe. The father closed the hood gently. The Mustang waited, not parked. Resting, the daughter opened a new page in her sketchbook. This time drawing headlights cutting through night, road stretching beyond cul-de-sac. Sky wide and fearless. She had stopped drawing storms. She was drawing aftermath. Change wasn't coming. It was here. Night returned softer, but carrying edge. Streetlights hummed. Wind moved slow like animal stalking. The purple suit stood alone outside HOA office across park, staring at houses as though trying to read minds through wood frames. Her shoulders slumped slightly, exhaustion leaking through perfect posture. Power without compliance feels like costume. Expensive, heavy, meaningless. She walked home under flickering lamplight, clipboard nowhere in sight. Neighbors watched her leave, not with fear, but curiosity. She felt eyes on her, and for the first time, she looked small inside her power. Authority shrinking inside uniform. No one spoke, yet everyone understood. Tomorrow would break something open, and when morning arrived, it did. Morning did not crawl in slowly. It arrived like something breaking through. Sunlight cut across rooftops with sharp, golden precision, as if it wasn't rising but claiming territory. The street woke fully, awake the way a body wakes after trauma. Alert, watching its own pulse. Birds perched on wires did not scatter at movement today. Even small creatures sensed shift. Calm was not peace. It was a held breath before release. The kind of silence that does not soften but tightens. Something was going to move. Everyone felt it beneath skin, like heartbeat too loud. The father walked the garage, red-white shirt crisp from overnight drying, eyes focused forward. The daughter followed with sketchbook tucked under arm like witness carrying record. She stood beside engine with expectation, not hope. Her drawings no longer imagined. They predicted. He turned the key. The Mustang roared awake, louder than last night, louder than rain, louder than everything that tried to silence them for months. Exhaust thundered off walls like war drums. Chrome vibrated. Ground trembled. Neighbors froze, not frightened, but awakened like sleepers jolted into fight. The engine didn't purr. It growled. It demanded movement. For the first time in years, the Mustang was not a relic. It was a weapon. The father eased it onto driveway, tires rolling over wet concrete, like beasts reclaiming territory. The daughter stood behind him, hair pushed by warm exhaust wind, her small frame looking impossibly steady. She did not shield her ears. She absorbed the sound like purpose. The cul-de-sac gathered slowly, drawn not by curiosity, but inevitability. People stepped out of houses, as though answering a call they didn't remember hearing. Feet touched pavement soft, then rooted. They didn't speak, they existed. Presence filled street, like rising tide. And then the HOA arrived, not in silence, not in suggestion, in force. 3 black SUVs turned onto road, engines deep, windows mirror dark. The purple suit woman stepped out first, not with hesitation this time, but with last stand energy. Shoulders squared, chin lifted, hair pinned perfectly into place like armor. This was not inspection. This was confrontation. Behind her, board members followed. Behind them, new contractors, more than yesterday, equipment heavy, built for seizure, not maintenance. No one hid intention now. They came to take what resisted. They came to remove symbol, silent spark, restore control by force of not consent. But something had changed while they planned power. The neighborhood was no longer asleep. Dozens of residents stood aligned along driveways, arms folded, expressions unreadable. Old men who once trimmed lawns in silence now stood shoulder to shoulder. Mothers with toddlers on hips did not move aside. Teenagers with bikes rested wheels against legs like shields. No one blocked path, but no one cleared it. Opposition without aggression. Resistance through presence. The father stepped into street, Mustang idling behind him like thunder waiting for sky to crack open. The daughter joined him, small hand resting against fender like she was grounding lightning. The HOA expected resistance to look like rage. It did not. It looked like stillness, unbreakable, unmoving, unbowed. The purple suit stepped forward, rain left over from night glistening on her polished fabric. She raised her chin, not out of pride, but out of necessity. Authority must look tall when it feels small. Her eyes scanned neighborhood, and found no obedience left to harvest. Power flinched, not outwardly, but inside her chest. The contractors moved first, advancing toward Mustang with heavy gloves and chain straps meant for towing. Boots echoed like war beginning. Neighbors tensed, not to fight, to hold ground. One step closer, and something irreversible would cross the threshold. The father didn't move. He stood like monument, like tree carved from stormwood, like mountain refusing shovel. His presence alone held the entire street in gravitational tension. Mustang growled louder. Engine rumbled, vibrating air like pulse of revolution. The moment hung like lightning suspended in sky, waiting for ground to choose where it strikes. Then it happened, not an explosion, in revelation. One neighbor stepped forward, quietly, calmly, and stood beside him. No words, no commands. Just one person refusing to watch from distance. Then another joined, then 2 more. Within seconds, a line formed, not aggressive, not armed, but human. A wall of presence that authority could not find, restrain, or remove. Power became small in comparison. The contractor stopped walking, confusion shaking hands that were built for certainty, not conscience. The purple suit's breath caught, subtle, sharp, unmistakable. She turned her eyes back to the man, and something inside her broke soundlessly. Not defeat, not surrender, recognition. She had not lost control of one resident. She had lost control of all witness. Authority without belief is scaffolding without building. It collapses under its own design. Storm clouds parted above as the sky exhaled. Sun cut through heavy gray like blade through old rope. Light hit Mustang hood, dazzling, reflective, triumphant. For a moment, engine, father, daughter, neighbors glowed like prophecy fulfilled. The contractors lowered tools. SUV engines quieted. The HOA board stiffened into still statues. Power stood naked for first time, visible, fragile, terrified. And without a word spoken, something irreversible happened. The HOA stepped back, not in retreat, in collapse. The purple suit lowered her clipboard, exhaled, and blinked away certainty, like dust blown from old monument. The board followed her movement like sheep follow shadow when shepherd leaves. Control dissolved like sugar dropped into rainwater. The father opened Mustang door. The daughter climbed into passenger seat. Neighbors watched without fear now, with expectation. He turned the wheel slowly. The engine thundered louder. The car moved. One house. Then two. Then the end of street. Not escape. Declaration. The sound of tires on wet asphalt echoed through community, like bell announcing end of rule. The HOA stood frozen behind, silhouettes shrinking in mirror like old ghosts fading in daylight. The daughter rested her hand out window, fingers slicing air like someone touching freedom for first time. Wind pushed her hair back like wings unfolding. She smiled quietly, not with joy, with understanding. Storms do not free people. They reveal who is ready to leave. The Mustang reached end of road, where pavement met open world beyond community gates. The father paused, engine rumbling like heart refusing silence. He looked forward, not back. Revolutions do not rewind. They drive. They continue. They expand. He accelerated slowly at first, then stronger, Mustang leaping forward like beast denied movement for years. Exhaust thunder rolled behind them like storm parting to make way for sun. The car disappeared beyond horizon, not fleeing, evolving. The neighborhood remained behind, no longer quiet, no longer controlled, no longer asleep. The HOA stood alone at center of empty power. Their empire ended not by attack, but by awakening. The road beyond the neighborhood stretched like a future no one had ever allowed themselves to imagine. Asphalt shimmered under rising heat, horizon wide and unmarked, no fences, no notices, no rules. The Mustang moved through the morning like red-white thunder, engine alive with months of restrained breath, release at last. The father didn't look in the mirror. There was nothing behind him he wanted returned. The daughter leaned into the wind with closed eyes, letting the world paint itself across her face. Her fingers fluttered outside window like wings she could finally remember how to use. Freedom did not roar. It hummed. Low, warm, endless. The neighborhood shrank behind them, not abandoned, but transformed. People no longer stood in driveways like statues waiting for permission. They spoke softly. They looked at each other. They existed without fear, like suddenly remembering a language they once knew fluently. Control had not been defeated. It had been outgrown. Miles rolled beneath Mustang tires like pages flipping in a book that had always deserved a second half. The father drove without destination, only direction. Away. Forward. Alive. Every mile was healing stitched into pavement. Every breath pulled deeper than lungs used to allow. The daughter opened her sketchbook in her lap. No storm. No fences. No HOA forms stacked like weapons. She drew the road instead, long, bright, open like promise. She shaded light across hood, added movement to wheels, left sky blank so it could still grow. Cars passing in opposite directions slowed, heads turning, eyes drawn to thunderbright machine moving like purpose. They didn't know story, didn't know history, but they felt something, the way animals feel weather change before clouds break. It was not just a car driving. It was a man reclaiming his name. Hours passed without hunger, without fatigue, without doubt. The world widened. Streets turned into highways, highways into open country lines, cities into fields. Trees stretched high, grass waves rolled gold under noon sun, skies softened into deep, endless blue. No one told him to stop. No one measured his lawn. No one fined his existence. Freedom is often not loud. It is quiet enough to breathe. They stopped only once, at a hill overlooking valleys stretched like history undone. The father sat on hood, daughter beside him, boots brushing grass wet with leftover morning dew. They didn't speak. They watched air move like thoughts too heavy to say aloud, too simple to lose meaning in words. From here, the neighborhood was memory, not wound. The father felt weight inside bones finally dissolve. No notices, no signatures, no purple suit shadow. Just wind brushing across skin like forgiveness given not by others, but by self. The daughter rested her head on his arm softly, not clinging, just belonging. She drew again, but this time she sketched people standing strong, not houses standing silent. Neighbors together, not separated by rules. Grass uneven, but alive. A street with imperfections like scars. Proof of healing, not damage. She didn't draw the HOA building. She didn't draw uniforms. She didn't draw fear. Some things do not deserve remembering. As sun dipped lower, colors poured across sky like spilled paint. Oranges melting into pink, pink fading to deep violet. The father watched the horizon turn to gold and realized something quietly enormous. He was no longer surviving. He was living. The daughter closed sketchbook, gently and took his hand. Small fingers, firm grip, future tethered to past without being owned by it. They walked back to Mustang slowly, like leaving shrine, not escaping, but honoring. The engine started softer this time. No roar of rebellion, just hum of purpose. They drove into sunset without rush. Night rose above them, gradual, patient, star-stitched. The car headlights cut forward through darkness like certainty. The neighborhood behind them kept changing long after they left. Neighbors met at fences and spoke about life instead of rules. Mailboxes were not perfectly painted, but filled with real letters now. Kids rode bikes without counting cracks in sidewalk refines. Lawns grew wild in places, and no one wrote warnings. And the purple suit woman, she moved differently too, not like ruler, like survivor. Some nights she walked street alone after sunset, papers no longer in hand, head lifted, breathing air not measured for compliance. She watched families laugh on porches and realized something she had never been trained to understand. People did not want freedom given. They wanted freedom returned. She passed a driveway where Mustang once sat like thunder trapped in rust. She paused there sometimes, hand brushing her sleeve where fear once lived. The space felt empty, but not painful, like a chapter closed, not torn. She changed quietly. Control taught her power. Collapse taught her humility. Witness taught her human. And somewhere down Long Road, the father and daughter slept in motel rooms with buzzing neon signs and warm lamplight. Ate breakfast in diners filled with strangers who smiled without reason. Past fields, oceans, cities, none demanding perfection. Their life became movement, not escape, expansion. The car that once sat unstarted like grief now carried them like possibility. Sometimes they stopped by lakes at dawn, watching mist lift like ghosts forgiven. Sometimes they parked beneath stars, so bright the night felt soft enough to hold. The daughter grew older, sharper, braver, unbroken. She carried sketchbooks filled with roads instead of fences, sunsets instead of warnings, mountains instead of hearings. She would one day tell their story, not with anger, but with clarity. How power failed, how community woke, how a car that refused to die became proof that neither do people. Years later, Mustang paint faded not with age, but with miles. The father's hair grayed at edges like frost on morning grass. But his eyes remained bright, not young but alive, always alive. Every town, every state, every road became chapter written without permission slips. Home no longer meant address. It meant movement, choice, breath. The HOA never chased them, because there was nothing left to chase. They had lost control, not when he resisted, but when everyone watched. Revolutions are not loud. Sometimes they are engines turning in storm. Sometimes they are neighbors stepping forward. Sometimes they are a daughter opening sketchbook to blank page. The father never returned to that street. He didn't need to. He left something there stronger than presence. He left a question. What happens when people stop being afraid? And that question never disappeared. Not from homes. Not from boardrooms. Not from purple suits. Like rumble in distance. Like thunder beyond horizon. It lived. The story ends not with destruction, but with departure. With engine humming into forever. With a man and his daughter moving forward. Always forward. On a road no one controls. Because true freedom was never a destination. It was the moment they began driving.